Greetings, everyone. I'm Mar. Once again, this is my opinion. As you can tell from the title up there, this is my review and a little bit of a rant on Coming to America, the sequel to Coming to America. But of course, this one is all cutesy because the two is a two. Oh, Amazon marketing. Now, to set the stage for this, Coming to America, the original, is the only one of Eddie Murphy's lead role films that I've ever seen. I know some people are going to go, yeah, but it's true. I actually looked through his filmography last night just to double check, and it's the only one. Every other one of his where he's a lead, I've just seen like bits and pieces, but never all the way through. And everything else of his I've seen, he's usually a minor character, and it's an ensemble cast like Shrek and Mulan, stuff like that. Now, it has been years, but I still do remember certain things about the film from when I saw it as a kid sometime in the mid 90s. Him wanting to find someone for him, moving to Queens, because, the perfect place to find a bride. And of course, Sam Jackson's cameo. It would be wise of you to put the weapon down. Their face being on the money. His father being played by James Earl Jones. I grew to love your father. Stuff like that. But I never watched it later, and there are other films of his from the 80s I've been meaning to watch. Now, that said, even though it had been years, when I first heard that they were making a sequel to this, two things immediately popped in my head. It's like, why? Because of all the Eddie Murphy films that you could make a sequel to, why would you make a sequel to Coming to America? The whole story is pretty self-contained and complete with that. I mean, you could always just make another 48 Hours sequel or something like that, or do a do-over Beverly Hills Cop 3, because I always hear that third one, yeah. But instead, they decided to go with this, so it's like, why? Then I saw the trailer, and from how it was put together, I'm like, alright, not too bad. Of course, that could be a big red flag, because it could be a thing where the trailer is better than the film. Which, in all honesty, I'm going to say the trailer is better than the film in this case, but there's also another thing about it. The trailer lies. You mean the trailer lied? Yes, it did. Because here's the thing. The way that the trailer presents the film, it makes it seem like it's like the original film. The majority of it takes place in Queens. That they'd be looking for his son for a good portion of the film and then return home. But nope. That's only like the first 10 minutes of the film and the last part of it. So they lied there. The only positive I can say in that regard is that it's not like other modern trailers where they give away everything about the film to the point where you want to reach through the screen, grab the editor by their scrawny necks, rip them out, and why do you always have to edit that? Which, of course, that becomes even a bigger pet peeve when they spoil major plot points about the film. Terminator Genesis, I'm looking at you in your second trailer. Now, the plot of the film is it takes place 30 years after the original. In real life, it's been a little bit longer, but 30 years, nice round number. King and Queen celebrating their 30th anniversary. They have 3 lovely daughters. And his father, played by James Earl Jones, is sick and he is dying. Everything seems to be going all right. Although from the beginning you can tell something might be a bit off. Because it's like, wait a minute. But how Eddie Murphy's character said he's going to change things, why are they still greeting him like this? That is abated a little bit when you realize it's their anniversary. So you're like, okay. It could be just that that's how they greet him on their anniversary or something. And then, of course, we see Eddie training with his daughters. We see that they're really going through a lot of royal stuff. But then as the minutes go by, you realize not much has changed in Zumanda since the first film. I mean, they've given the illusion of change without it being changed. Hey, it sounds just like at home. Well, Eddie Murphy's father dies pretty quickly, which I'm glad they didn't spoil that in the trailer, even though it's pretty obvious he's probably going to be dead by the end of the film. But before he goes, he reveals to Eddie Murphy that he has a son in Queens. As the old shaman guy keeps telling him, a bastard son. Illegitimate. Which, even with the trailer, this is one plot element that I was like this at, even though I haven't seen the film in years, because I was thinking, alright, how is this possible? I mean, I'm going to let the film try to explain how it is possible, but it's like, how? It's like, my memory of the original film is not 100% accurate, but even I am like, when did he have time to sow his royal oats, to borrow a phrase that they use in the film proper? And then they explain it, that at one point during the course of the original film, before Eddie Murphy's character met his queen, they go off on this little side adventure where the servant, played by Arsenio Hall, sows his oats, and Eddie essentially gets date raped, and this is the Leslie Jones character. Which, Leslie Jones, she seems like a nice lady in real life when you're talking with her, but in her film appearances, I have not found one that I really liked. I mean, Ghostbusters 2016, I think, is enough saying because of how sexist and insulting that film was. If there's any film that needs to be quote-unquote canceled, it's that one. Because of how insulting that was, and basically just being sexist, but not acting like it because they reversed the genders. It's like, if that the one was like how the original film was, where it's a male cast with the female secretary, you know that people would have lambasted it, and rightfully so. But getting back in here, I'm going to bring up something like that in a second. It's like, so she got pregnant with the king's son by blowing this weird drug thing in his face after using this whole candle thing around her private parts. And the film acts like that's fine, like it's another day at the office, completely ignoring the fact that she date raped Eddie Murphy. Date rape is date rape. You give someone any type of drugs, doesn't matter if you slip a roofie into their drink, even Odie's mad about this, doesn't matter, you inject them with something, put chloroform over their mouth, or do what Leslie Jones did, and put all the smoke in front of her face. It's still freaking date rape. And the film just ignores it. I mean, after the fact, they only mentioned it one other time when Eddie Murphy is talking about it offhandedly, and it's candid. It's like, you would think that he'd be a little bit more upset because of the circumstances of his bastard son's conception, but no. And it's like, did they really include this in a film released in 2021 and just to imagine it to go sweep under the rug? Now, especially with all the weird controversy going on with Pepe Le Pew and other stuff, Pepe got quote-unquote canceled because of his harassment of the cat. The way, just not to get on a tangent, that's the way it's, just from what I'm looking, that seems to be the thing that got him pulled, is that, not his French stereotype thing. He used to be with the accent, be stinky all you want, that's that thing. But this thing, they're trying to act like it's fine? No! Who in their right mind would think that's fine? It's just a throwaway gag like that. It's just as stupid as that Raybert episode, Getting Away with Itchstick, which I'll rant on that when I finally get around to season 6 of Everybody Loves Raymond. If you don't know what I mean, Google Raybert and you'll see what I mean by that. But this is like, who thought this was a good idea? I'm not going to bring up the writers. They don't deserve to have their names even mentioned by me. But I know there's multiple ones, so it's like, this definitely strikes as a joke that was thrown in there for comedic effect. And probably to go with whole Leslie Jones's timing and all that. But Matt brought this up in his rant of it, which is a pretty good rant, by the way. If you were to reverse the genders of Eddie Murphy and Leslie Jones, and it is a male taking advantage of a female in this way, you can bet that critics, fans, everybody would be grabbing this film, nailing it to the wall, and giving it 5,000 lashes with a razor-sharp whip. And rightfully so. But just because it's a female doing it to that, it seems to be alright. Now, the film hasn't been out that long, and I haven't really read many of the critical reviews, so I don't know if people actually are lambasting it like that, but it's like, you'd think this would be an aspect of the film that would have gotten wider attention after just a couple days, but I rarely see people talking about it. Certain groups is probably going to be because it's female on male, but it's like, it doesn't matter. I mean, I consider myself a classical feminist, and with that, classical feminism, it's like you treat everyone equally regardless of gender. If someone rapes someone, they rape someone. If it's a male raping a woman raping a man, doesn't matter. It's still rape. No consent. And the way they even play off the scene, I was like, I don't really see Eddie saying a yes. Someone's probably going to be a smart ass and go, well, he didn't say no. And just because he didn't say anything does not imply consent. By that logic, you can have your way with someone that's mute and it wouldn't be rape because they can't consent by words. It's like, there's no logic to that. And again, with some people, it's like you're trying to apply logic to an illogical situation. Hey, it's Vince McMahon. I bet he probably thought this film was the height of comedy. I mean, with this whole thing. It's such good shit. Bruce, this is great. Now, when Eddie does find out and finds out it is indirectly Arsenio's fault, he does to Arsenio what we all want to do to the writers, run at them and strangle them. It's one part of this film I'm like, if there's anything that sums up this film perfectly, it's that. And if there's anything else that sums up this film perfectly, it's Eddie and the old makeup for the barbershop guy at the end where he's doing a face palm. Where it's like, that's the metaphor for the film right there. Well, Eddie and Arsenio, after his father dies, he's doing a lot of soul searching about it. Because part of it is due to Wesley Snipes' general character, which, in theory, this character could have worked. I mean, the movie, the country is in Africa. As we all know, there are still some warlords there. I mean, there was that whole thing a few years ago about trying to catch that one African warlord that is taking all the children to train as soldiers, which they do reference that at one point, which was one of the few moments in the film that I got a light chuckle out of, because it's Wesley Snipes dressed up as a African warlord reading stories to little children soldiers, and then when he says go off and play, like, your grenades, watch out for the Saron. It's like, that got a little chuckle out of me. Which, as a quick aside, that is the most I got, was little chuckles. There was like maybe one moment where I got an actual legit laugh out, but that's the thing about a comedy, is that if it's not giving you a lot of laughs and not very funny, it's disappointing and bad. That's the worst thing you could be with a comedy. I mean, if you're a comedy and people are laughing at it for the wrong reasons, you're still working as a comedy, just not the way you intended. Just the same thing as, it's just like if you're a serious film and people are laughing at you like it's a comedy. I mean, people are enjoying it, just not for the right reason. Here, you can't even enjoy it for it's so bad it's good. It's like, anyway, with the warlord character, he lives in a country with a name that is so stupid, it goes into the whole unobtainium category. Nextoria is like, really? Nextoria? That sounds like something you would hear as a gag on Animaniacs or Hysteria or one of those Saturday morning cartoon shows. Not a multi-million-dollar Hollywood production. Granted, it was released via Amazon, but it was still produced by a major studio because the Paramount Pictures name is still on the film's opening credits. It's like, really? Nextoria? And then him wanting retribution for Eddie Murphy's character standing up his sister, which this is one part of the original film. I forgot the whole bark like... They say bark like a dog here, but according to Matt's rant, I guess it's a orangutan thing. That's one part of the original film I didn't remember, so if I hadn't seen that, I would not have known any different. But making animal sound, jumping around on one leg. It's like, really? She's been doing that for 30 years? But I guess it just shows to what extent females in these cultures will go to please the crown prince within film, and wanting to marry one of his sons to one of his daughters. Of course, his eldest daughter, the one who should be his heir, is like her mother, very independent, headstrong, but also respectful of both the fact she comes from American culture and her father's culture. So she's not going to go for it. And then, of course, the whole thing of, okay, then you can marry your son to my daughter. Oh, yeah, you don't have a son. Which is like, that's the whole thing about this film not seeming like it's progressed a lot that I mentioned earlier. Because it's like, just because he doesn't have a son, really? That's one of those things that if he really was going with how he seemed to be at the end of the first film and wanting to change things, it would have been like, so what, I don't have a son. What does that mean? I still have children. She is my heir. But nope, it seems like he's kowtowing to his father's wishes about male only primogenitor. It's like, really? We're still going to go with all that thing? I know there's some places where that still is a thing in this day and age, so that's probably why they decided to keep it in there, but it's like, no. It's like the whole time when they were bringing up drama involved in that, I was thinking of the ending of Disney's animated Aladdin. It's like, you're now the king. Your word is law. You can change the tradition. You can make a female heir. Which he does in the end, but it's like, did we really need a whole movie's length of time to go by for him to realize that? He's the king. He has the power. But nope. They just have to do that there for drama. And because of this, and him wanting to get his son and go with tradition, for a good portion of the film, Eddie essentially becomes his father. I mean, he's not as overbearing as James Earl Jones played the character in the first film and the little bit he's in this film. But it's still one of those things, like, you became your father. Which, I could see why the writers wanted to go with that, as much as I don't like the plot development. Because there are times in real life where people say they'll be nothing like their parents, and then they realize after a bit, like, oh crap, I became exactly like my parents. Which I can safely say right now, I have not become anything like them, at least their negative aspects. Just their positive ones, which is a good thing. Because I could definitely say the negative one's not there. I mean, am I in jail for anything related to drugs? No, I am not. Have I stolen from people? No, I have not. But here it's like, Eddie, you became just like your traditionalist father. Not as bad, but it's like, yeah. It's like near the end of the movie where he gets kicked out of his bedroom. It's like, damn right. It's one of the few moments where I actually got a chuckle out of it because of how the actors play this scene. You do not kick the king out of his own bedroom. Oh, yes, she does. Well, Eddie does go to Queens, and this is where we get a couple callbacks from the original film. I mean, we got some callbacks already. See McDowell's, them opening one in Africa, still saying Laurie Anderson working there after all those years, which is like, it's nice to see Louis still getting work, but really, his character's still working there? The only major callback we really didn't get is we didn't get to see Sam Jackson on the streets of Queens, which is a disappointment for me because I wanted to see him. I think it would have been funny if, like, they go to an American McDonald's and he's the guy doing the mopping. Have a nice day. Stuff like that. Oh my God, is this hell again? Something like that. But, I think he's probably too busy earning all that Marvel money to want to reprise a quick little role here, even though he'll reference it when they do his film roll call. But even with that, it's still more memorable for him than the two other films he made around the same time, which I'll get to when I actually review the original film. Of course, you get the barbershop scene, which most of the humor in that scene is like what we see in the trailer, and makeup's nice. It's nice to see those characters. I mean, there's more jokes that they do in the actual film proper. But those are the funniest ones, Hey, we're going to roll too quick about that. Now, the way he finds his son is mystical, where it's that whole mystical guy the older guy in makeup. Says he saw a vision of his son, follow this. This is the drawing. Which is some mystical mumbo jumbo, but it's like, I'll go with it. They find his son and Leslie Jones at the apartment. They tell him, hey, we're going to bring you back. And they take both of them because it's the son's condition. And of course, Eddie did not tell his family before going back to Queens, which I'm surprised. It's like, how did he phrase it, or that he was going? Did he tell him he was going to go, just make a quick little diplomatic mission to Queens, just going back to get some stuff real quick? You'd think at least his wife would want to know, but nope, he doesn't tell them. And when he gets back, they're mad. Because for 1 minute, he's just gone, and he comes back like, hey, honey, hey, kids, guess what? You got a bastard half-brother. You got a bastard stepson, and this is his mother. They react accordingly. I mean, the eldest daughter is rightfully pissed. I mean, she was, holding her composure, but she wants to be the heir, and then she sees a male come in and her to be tossed aside. She reacts accordingly. She treats him like crap throughout the rest of the film. I mean, they do kind of mend fences when it comes to one of his princely tests involving the lion, but she reacts accordingly. I don't blame her. And then, of course, Eddie's wife in the film, it's like she's rightfully pissed. Mainly because she was lied to. But, of course, she's not going to treat the son bad because It's not like Eddie had a child out of wedlock by cheating on her like other monarchs did, which they do bring up. Like, you're not the first monarch that had an illegitimate son, and you will not be the last. And of course, this leads to one of the few moments I actually chuckled in the film where she mentions that it's not like you're the first person I had sexual congress with, and she's like, and Eddie's like, just the way he plays that off. It's like, okay, that's chuckle worthy. But a few chuckles here and there are not enough to save the film. Now, once the prince gets settled in, they put him through prince training. You got to pass all these trials in order to become my heir. And then the whole thing with the lion, the big gag there is that the cat farts. It's like, really? We had to go there? With this film, have we really dropped down to the level of toilet humor? I was like, really? Did you really have to throw in that gag? Did you really need to put a joke there? Was there a toilet humor quota in the writer's room? And it's like, what do we put here? Let's do a fart gag. It's like, ah. Now, as you can expect, this film does end up having a happy ending. Eddie Murphy learns the error of his ways. Family does come together. The older sister does reconcile a bit with the brother, helps him a bit. She ends up being recognized as the heirs because, Eddie learns the error of his ways. They avoid a war, which Wesley Snipes spends the whole film threatening if he doesn't get his way when it comes to the marriage. And of course, the illegitimate son does become a prince, but he's not the heir. He's just a prince in there. He doesn't have to follow the whole thing about marrying just for political alliances. And he follows his heart like his dad did. And he does get married, which the romance that the son has with essentially his secretary, for lack of a better term, it feels natural, and it's one of the parts of the film I actually did enjoy. Doesn't justify the film existing, but it's one part I actually liked, because I thought the two actually had a decent chemistry. The writing on it was pretty good, but at that time, it's like, it's one of those things, like, if you want to watch a romance like this in a film like this, just watch the original. There's no reason to have that in there. And it's one aspect of the film where it's like, yeah, this feels like one of those slight retread sequels. And as I was watching, it was actually this scene in particular that this comparison popped into my mind. This is a little pilfer from the nostalgia chick. And that is that this film feels like some of the Disney straight-to-video sequels, to where either the original characters or their children learn the same lesson that their parents did. And considering that the son has the same type of romance, I think it's a pretty apt description. That, yeah, he's learning the same thing, go with his own heart. And it's down to him even leaving just to have the wedding. Which, of course, for that part, that's when Eddie Murphy finally comes to his senses. And he actually shows up in time to see his son be married, which is a little nice thing. Of course, we get another reference from the original film there with that one priest. I was like, another shoehorn in there. It's like, why is he even still in business? You would think that after the 80s he'd be kicked out, but if you look at how many obviously charlatan priests are still in business, I mean, look at a lot of those evangelicals. A lot of them are charlatans, and yet they're still in business because their parishioners still buy it, and that's how they're able to afford those multi-million-dollar churches that you look at and go, I don't think Jesus would approve of that type of preaching environment, especially if there's people starving on the streets outside. That'd be one thing where he'd come in, grab you by your tie, bring you outside, and say, donate. Donate and prostrate yourself. He would definitely say that to this priest, but I'll say my thoughts on that character for when I revisit the original film. While I am a big fan of musicals and dancing in cinema, in this film, it just feels forced to me at times. There's a lot of moments, like the introduction of the princess, the ending part where they're dancing in celebration, which was really the only part I actually thought it made sense. James Earl Jones' funeral while he's still alive. By the way, that happens, and then he ends up dying at the end of it, so I guess he just wanted to see the celebration part before he passed away. Which, for some reason, this kind of reminded me of when they did that big old celebration in Mount Brooks about a decade ago. It's like one of the things, like something like that, like celebrating while they're still alive. So I guess they're going with that angle. But a lot of these moments, like, why did we have to put that in here? Did we really need to have a big old thing like that? It just feels off. And it also feels like filler, just to pad out the runtime. Like, you could have cut those off and it would have shaved maybe like 10, 15 minutes off the film, give or take. Wouldn't have affected the pacing that much, but it would have helped. Because in all honesty, there were a couple moments that were dragging that I just did the 10-second fast forward thing because I watched it on my computer via the Amazon app. Which, to put things into perspective, there's only one other time while watching a film for this channel that I've done that with, and that was Spring Breakers. Oh, Spring Breakers. Acting wise, the whole cast does what they can with this script, but with a subpar script, there's only so much you can do, especially when the jokes aren't that funny. Eddie, Arsenio, they're there for what they have to do. I'm more frustrated with how the characters are written than what they do acting wise. Wesley Snipes, it's like, man, did you really need the money that badly after your tax evasion charges if you wouldn't hear? Just from what little I've seen of him in Expendables 3, I thought he was better used there, even though they throw in the whole meta tax evasion joke. And it's not with him being slightly over the top in times. I mean, he's done that better. I mean, Demolition Man, anybody? There, it was used right. Here, it just borders on him being a caricature acting. Which goes into one thing to really describe this film. And that is that, Matt said this too in his, but it definitely is accurate. And that is, this film feels like a sequel that goes into self-parody territory. And I don't mean like self-parody like Abbott and Costello meet Frankenstein or meet the Mummy, to where they're taking the horror tropes of the previous entries, adding some comedy to it, and causing the genre fusion. This is to where it's like, really? We're going that bad with it? And because of how the humor is, it feels like an overly long Saturday Night Live sketch. Now, I know just from seeing the comments on a bunch of the videos online that there are times where Saturday Night Live, the sketches go long, and there's a whole running joke about them not knowing when to end a sketch. But this feels like the worst of it. Like, it's a sketch that never ends. It goes on past the runtime of the whole show. It's like one long sketch where you're watching it and go, come on, end it. End it. You can end it now. You can end it now. Oh my god. Oh my god, where's the remote? It's not gonna end. It's not gonna end. Oh no. Turn it off. Turn it off. Turn it off! And of course, this whole meta thing is taken to another level in that one nice scene between the son and his secretary I mentioned earlier. Because there's one line in there where they're talking about cinema, that this film went way meta, and that is their crack on American cinema, where they're talking about how it's all superhero films, remakes, and sequels to older films that nobody asked for. That's one of those moments where, if you're taken out of it by this point, the moment you hear it, you like pep up. You're like, I already knew the line was coming, so I was waiting for the scene. So then when I saw it, when I heard the opening part, I'm like, oh, here it is. And as I put it, as Christopher Titus said in his Love is Evil special, he's an idiot, but amazingly self-aware. It's like, did you guys really have to throw that in there? That definitely feels like a writer's room line. If this film was written in a writer's room, if not, it feels like one that they're like trying to figure out a way to be cutesy with the humor. You know, the ha ha. It's like, you didn't have to get that meta with it. I mean, that's a okay joke, but it sounds like it belongs in a totally different film. Not coming to America. The rest of the cast there, James Earl Jones, you definitely feel that he's his age now with that gravelly voice. But it's like, it's just sad seeing him in here. It makes me wonder just how much money all these actors made for reprising their roles. Like, oh. And of course, the director is the director of the Dolomite film Eddie Murphy did, which was his comeback vehicle. Because for years, even though, like I said earlier, I haven't seen a lot of his solo films, people have been talking about how his career has gone downhill ever since he did the Nutty Professor remake films, you know, with Haunted Mansion, Norbit, all those. How he just can't find a good one. Because he's picking bad scripts or being presented with bad ones, or he just doesn't have the same spark for comedy. Then the Dolomite one, everyone just did a complete flip on him, like, oh, we did a great job here, which I'd never heard of Dolomite before that film, which I probably am going to look into the Dolomite film proper and then look at that film that Eddie did. It's one of those things like, hey, yeah, with the director involved, it might work. Which I will say that if there's any other positive about this film, it's how it's shot. What I mean by that is how the film's camera angles are, how they pan and all that. That looks fine. I mean, when you compare it to the original, it has that modern flair because of the HD cameras, and everything is a little lighter in the background. But it's one of those things, like, it doesn't save the film. I mean, you could still say the film looks amazing and say that it's crap. It's the comedy von crap. And it's like, if it wasn't for wanting to do it for this video, I wouldn't have even watched the film after some of this stuff, other than watching both of them back to back. But I'm like, I'll pick my poison. You could do a drinking game with this film and probably be so hammered within the first 10 minutes that you just shut the film off. And there's not really much else to say about it other than it's like, why? Why? I mean, with other franchises, I can understand them doing sequels long after the fact, just regardless of what you feel. The Star Wars sequels, I can understand why they did them. Because the Star Wars universe is a universe where you could do other stories in it. Because, just as a little side, I don't really subscribe to the whole thing of them doing another story after it makes what they did in the original trilogy pointless. And that's mainly because I also come from reading the Legends stories, and if we go with that logic in those films, you have to apply it to the Legends material as well. So it's like, I just don't go with there. Now, if you want to go with Anakin's sacrifice meaningless, yeah, but then it's like, that's a whole other thing. That probably would go with this whole other thing. But those ones I can understand. Other than, the obvious, it's all about the money. Which that's the main reason why you'd make a sequel to Coming to America. It's all about the money. And you throw it on Amazon Prime, and anybody with a membership could just watch it for free as part of the membership. Like me. I have Amazon Prime, so I didn't waste any money watching this film. All I did was waste my time. Which, sadly, this is not a Patreon request, so I don't even have the whole thing of like, oh, I made a Patreon thing of it. I did it just for the whole rant. Yeah, this goes into the same category as the Halloween 2018, even though I'll say I like that film a lot better, even though it has some of the same suffering thing where it's like, it just feels like a greatest hits thing. At least there, though, it has a horror precedent in one of the Hammer Frankenstein films, which is essentially just the greatest hits with nothing new. So here, nothing. It's like, all I can say is if you're a fan of the original film, and you're morbidly curious about how bad this film is, I'd say give it a watch. But, just not worth it. Because as I said already, a bad comedy is a bad comedy. And I know this rant hasn't been that angry, but it's like, I'm more apathetic and just, than I am angry. Now, if I'd actually watched it multiple times as a kid, to the point where I was very, very invested in the original film and then watched this one, then I would be super, super angry. But it's like more like, instead of, but I would say just from the whole conception part, that is where the writers deserve a big old upside the schnoz. Oh, that concludes this review. Nothing really much else to say about this subject. If you enjoyed the video, click the subscribe button there. There's a lot of other videos on the channel. Still doing the Everybody Loves Raymond reviews. As of the time I'm recording this, I finally finished the Faulty Tower series reviews. Got my first Patreon request up. It's a review of Twister, so you might want to check that out. If you guys want to do any requests or support the channel, the Patreon link is down below, but it's also going to be in the pop-up screen. Or if you just want to do a random request, the PayPal link is also below. So, until next time, guys.